Hello everyone. Welcome to the Happy Life podcast. Before we begin, for those of you who are here for the first time, this is the place where I mainly share two main types of content. First, personal financial management skills, and second, the life experiences that I have accumulated. Once again, welcome everyone. In today's episode, I will share with you my reading journey as well as some experiences I have accumulated on how to make our reading more effective. For me personally, books are one of the greatest joys in life. I have loved reading since I was very young, and it is no exaggeration to say that most of what I have today, in terms of work, knowledge, and ways of thinking, is largely thanks to reading books. However, my reading journey has also been fraught with quite a few mistakes, which I will recount to you today. Hopefully, this will help you avoid those mistakes and make your reading more effective and enjoyable. I divide my reading journey into several stages. The first stage is when I would simply pick up any book and read it from start to finish, one book after another, without doing anything else afterward. During this time, since I was still young, most of the books I read were fiction, like Robinson Crusoe, or adventure books by Jules Verne such as 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or Around the World in 80 Days. With these books, reading them straight through wasn't an issue. However, later on, as I grew older, most of the books I read were non-fiction, specializing in various fields and professional skills. It was then that I realized that this method of reading caused the amount of knowledge I gained from these books to fade quickly. Right after reading, I remembered a lot, but within a few weeks, almost all of it was gone, retaining only about 20% to 30%. Due to this reading method, whenever I encountered a related issue, I could only vaguely remember having read about the topic somewhere, but finding the exact information again was quite a challenge. The more I realized that this method was not effective, the more I began to transition into the second stage, where I started to take notes while reading. With this method, all you basically need is a pen. The advantage of this approach is that when you reread a book or need to find specific information, the noteworthy ideas are already highlighted, making it easier to locate them. Additionally, it helped me develop a very important habit of reading attentively, because I had to pay attention to highlight key passages. Before adopting this habit, I often found myself reading just for the sake of reading, with the words passing in front of me but not really sinking in. With the habit of reading and highlighting simultaneously, it helped me focus more, which in turn allowed me to grasp more information. Since adopting this habit, the amount of knowledge I have gathered has significantly increased. If the old method allowed me to retain only 20%, this new method has doubled that to 40%. However, 40% is still quite low because if we consider the effort it takes to read a book and only retain 40% of the knowledge, it is clearly a waste. That was when I moved on to the third stage of my reading journey. The third stage began when I discovered the Kindle. I remember it was around 2007 or 2008 when Amazon released the first Kindle. For those who may not know, the Kindle is an e-reader. It uses e-ink technology for its screen, not LCD like phones or tablets, which gives it a paper-like reading experience without causing eye strain. One of the great features of the Kindle is its ability to store all highlights in a separate area within the book, making it easy to access them later. I was very fond of it because I believed the Kindle fulfilled my need to review my highlights. Additionally, it was around that time that I discovered minimalism, a lifestyle that brought significant positive changes to my life. I may discuss this topic further in another podcast episode with you all. Since then, I have almost exclusively used Kindle and haven't bought physical books. Most of the physical books I have are either gifts or, if I do buy them, they are typically for giving to others. Discovering Kindle marked the third phase of my journey, and it was through using Kindle that I discovered Audible, marking the fourth phase. This came about when Amazon introduced a technology they called WhisperSync in a later version. They advertised WhisperSync as a feature that synchronizes the books we are reading with an audiobook service named Audible. It was my first introduction to Audible, and I immediately took a liking to it because Audible offers audio format books, meaning it reads to us instead of us having to read. Audible changed how I absorb knowledge significantly because with Audible, I can listen while driving, walking, running, or even while eating, much like listening to podcasts that many of you are currently enjoying. I live in Australia, where most people rarely drive to work and instead use public transportation. In Sydney, where I reside, the city is expansive, and it's quite normal to spend 20 to 30 minutes on a train commuting from home to the office, even longer for others. During this time, I listened to a lot of audiobooks on Audible, as it became my primary source for reading. Then came the fifth stage, because I was so enthusiastic about Audible, I started joining book reading communities on Audible, and that's when I discovered a speed reading technique on Audible. Within the Audible app, it allows me to increase the reading speed, which helps me digest books even faster. Learning this technique is quite easy. Initially, you can practice by increasing the speed to about 1.3, and after getting used to that speed, gradually increase it to 1.4 or 1.5 over time. Then, continue listening for a while at each speed before increasing again if desired. Personally, because I've been using this method for a long time, I now listen at 1.7 speed for less complex books, and 1.5 for slightly more complex ones. Imagine, with these speeds, I save a significant amount of time while still gathering the same amount of knowledge. This method is one of the experiences that I've been sharing with my friends and everyone around me, and after a while, they all come back to share with me that it's truly effective. You should give it a try, practice it, and after some time when you get used to the new speed, try switching back to 1.0 speed. You'll find it very slow by then, unnecessarily slow. Besides, this method also has an additional benefit. It helps improve listening skills in English for those who are not fluent in the language. Since discovering Audible along with speed reading, it's like my reading life turned a new page. From then on, I read a tremendous amount. On average, I would finish a book in just a few days. I remember the peak was a year when I counted over 100 books read, meaning I was reading about 2 to 3 days per book. For non-fiction books, this speed was quite high, but too much of anything isn't good. Because I was so engrossed in Audible, after a while, I started to realize I was reverting to stage 1, where I was reading just to read. The number of books I read increased significantly, but their depth lacked. I read hundreds of books, but the knowledge retention after finishing each one dropped significantly. Finding a good book was already difficult, and investing time to read it only to retain about 30% of its content felt wasteful. To illustrate, each time I found a good book was like finding a delicious fruit, but with my reading style, it was as if I took a few bites and then tossed it away. I consumed hundreds of such fruits, and while the quantity was high, compared to what I discarded, it was all too wasteful. This line of thinking led me to evolve into the fourth stage. This stage is the one I want everyone to pay attention to because it has truly helped me a lot. It's almost the opposite of previous stages. This stage is where I decided that from now on, I will focus more on quality than quantity, and I began to sit down and try to build for myself an effective way of reading books. This method takes a bit more time and effort, but it's much more effective. Firstly, I still use Audible, but from now on, I've determined that Audible is only a tool for me to quickly scan through books. Audible helps me read books very quickly, so it allows me to quickly grasp the entire book and determine whether it's good or not. As I mentioned earlier, finding good books to read is crucial because reading a bad book can sometimes be worse than not reading at all. Firstly, it wastes my time, and secondly, in the long run, it kills my enthusiasm for reading. Then, the first step is, after listening through once on Audible, I basically determine if this is a really good book. Then I will read it again the second time, this time on Kindle, and during the reading process, I take notes. During that time, I found a way to synchronize my Kindle notes through Evernote. At that time, I still used Evernote, but later I switched to Notion. I'll talk about Notion later. For those who don't know, Evernote is a note-taking tool. Imagine in Evernote, I have a folder where all my notes from the books I've read are stored. Occasionally, I go back there and reread those notes. This method helps me avoid forgetting the good ideas in the books I've read. However, after a while, I realized this method still requires me to actively seek out information I want. So I searched on the internet and found someone named Ollie. He's a doctor living in England who loves reading and finding ways to make everything more efficient. Through him, I learned about a service called Readwise, which is exactly what I was looking for. Readwise works by connecting to my Kindle account, syncing all my notes to their server, and sending me an email every day with random samples of the notes I saved while reading Kindle books. Thanks to this method, my notes don't get lost because Readwise automatically retrieves and sends them back to me every day. It's quite coincidental that many times in the emails they send me, there are notes that are directly relevant to the issues I encounter on those days. Another advantage of Readwise is that I no longer use Evernote. Instead, I switched to using Notion. Notion is a powerful note-taking service that has now become almost like my personal database. Readwise helps me directly link from Kindle to Notion. So now all the notes from the books I've read are neatly organized in Notion. In general, for those using Kindle, I highly recommend using Readwise. I'll leave the registration link below in the description for anyone who wants to try it out. I think Readwise offers a 2-week or 1-month trial period, after which you have to pay a fee, but the usage fee is quite cheap, around $5 to $10 per month. Now, if anyone follows my sharing up to this point, I can guarantee that the amount of knowledge they absorb will increase by at least 50 to 60%. This means with just a few simple setups, from now on, you can absorb 3 times more knowledge compared to the initial stage where you read without doing anything else. Now, I will continue sharing with you a new stage, and this stage is truly the most beneficial for me. If possible, I strongly advise you to strive to reach this stage. The stages after this one are optional, you can do them or not. This stage takes a bit more time, but it's well worth it and has truly helped me a lot. The reason it takes time is because everything I've shared with you so far only needs to be done once. We just need to take the effort to set up Kindle, then set up Readwise, and then set up Notion. But once you've done it once, there's no need to do it again, just read on Kindle, highlight, and everything else runs automatically. However, with this next method, you'll need to sit down and put in a little effort. That is, you need to develop a habit. Every time you read a book, use a mind map to summarize the main ideas of the book in a way that you understand. If anyone here doesn't know how to use mind maps, you can search for tools on Google. There are many tools to help us create mind maps. Mind maps are actually very easy to use, but if anyone doesn't know how to use them, it's okay, you can summarize books using any text editor. When I have time, I will create a podcast to guide you on how to use mind maps effectively. Regarding the structure, you can reuse the structure of the book itself, with each branch representing a chapter, and within each chapter, you can note down the ideas in the way you understand them. The important thing is that it is recorded in your own voice. By doing this gradually over time, we will have a series of mind maps from the books we have read. Personally, it is very useful for me whenever I need to look up specific information. Currently, most of the books I like have mind maps, including those I have read before but didn't have mind maps for. I still reread them to create mind maps. From my personal experience, I find this method, although very simple, extremely effective. As I mentioned earlier, just stopping at this step alone can already be highly effective. Based on the scale we often use, I can confidently say that with this approach, it will help us increase the amount of knowledge we gain from a book to around 70 to 80%. If there are any gaps, it might be only around 20 to 30%. Now, I'm about to share the next two steps with you, which I'll temporarily call the advanced steps. Personally, I'm gradually practicing them and haven't yet made them a habit. The first step involves the mind map. Instead of merely summarizing the content of the book, now include an additional section to jot down my thoughts and perspectives, what I agree with, what I disagree with, points that resonate with me, and ideas I intend to apply in my daily work. Essentially, there's a segment where it's purely my personal view on the topics discussed in the book. The crucial aspect here is that these are written in my own words, reflecting my thought process. As a result, they stick in my mind for a long time, and whenever I revisit them alongside the mind map of the content above, nearly all the information I grasped while reading returns to me almost entirely intact, with very little loss. This is my current stage, and I'm still working on making it a habit. Now, whenever I finish reading a book or even while I'm in the process of reading, I immediately start writing these sections. Personally, I find writing quite natural. Usually, when I read a book, I already have many thoughts in my head, so sitting down to write about them is relatively easy for me. However, I understand that some of you may not enjoy writing or might not be skilled at it. In such cases, I still encourage you to give writing a try because, in reality, I don't show it to anyone as long as it's my perspective and my writing style. I've personally used this method and found it very effective. Now, I will share with you the final step, which honestly, I'm just starting to implement. However, based on my research and conversations with those who have been doing this for years, they all agree that this step is highly valuable. Personally, even though I've only just begun, I already feel it's adding value to my future. Here's how I do it. Up until now, everything I've shared with you, I've been doing for many years. Over time, I've amassed a substantial collection of highlights, valuable knowledge from books, and insights from my daily life experiences. It's like I have a pile of bricks, and now, at this step, I'm using all those bricks to build a complete house with all its rooms. Specifically, I create a page similar to a wiki page using Notion because Notion allows linking between pages. There, I organize all these bricks into different categories reflecting various aspects of my life. For example, I have sections for professional experiences, communication skills, life skills, and many other areas relevant to my life. Each page has subpages and subtopics linked to notes and summaries I've gathered over time. Imagine that gradually I'm building a repository where all my accumulated experiences and lessons are centralized, systematically structured for easy access according to my needs. To put it humorously, it's like a form of treasure trove or my own living manual. I believe it will bring tremendous value to my life. I've shared with you all my journey of reading books. From the naive stages of simply burying my head in books without taking any notes, to the phase where Audible captivated me, and I read hundreds of books in a year, though many of them slipped away. Now, I focus more on quality rather than quantity. Now, I'm sure there are people saying, "Oh my God, why does reading have to be so complicated? Just enjoy the books and leave out all the hassle." But you really have to do it this way, my friends. If you just keep your head down and read without any method, it would be a waste, and what a waste of knowledge it would be. Personally, honestly speaking, looking back now, I just wish someone had shared this with me a bit earlier. If they had, the amount of knowledge I've gathered would surely be much greater by now. By the way, I would also like to add that the methods I just shared are mainly for applying to academic books and nonfiction. For those of you who read fiction for entertainment and relaxation, just focus on enjoying them without worrying too much about these methods. However, I must say that even with fiction books, I believe there is a lot of knowledge that we can apply to our daily work and life. I hope through this podcast episode, which might be quite long, I've helped you all achieve a more effective reading method, or at least I've inspired you further to read, because reading truly is beneficial. I'll wrap up today's discussion here. I hope these insights have provided some value to you all. If you find this content helpful, please share it with your friends and family. Also, since YouTube's algorithm favors videos with more likes, if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button to help our podcast reach more people. Thank you for watching, and I wish you all a delightful evening with your loved ones and family.